Hey, everybody, welcome back to Reasonably Happy. Today is a great day to be alive, and that is the theme of today's show. Imagine how being diagnosed with a terminal disease would change the way you approach every single day. 2 years ago, my friend Thad Reichley went to the doctor because he thought he had the flu, and he did have the flu. But when initial treatments didn't address his symptoms, subsequent procedures and a surgery revealed that Thad had 3 dozen tumors in the lining around his lungs. He was diagnosed with stage 4 metastatic melanoma, for which there is no known cure. A husband, father, educator, and pro-level endurance athlete, Thad's job today is to fight cancer and stay alive. In addition to his treatment's side effects, which include fever, vomiting, inflammation of the eyes, and savage bouts of colitis, Thad also has to navigate the negative thoughts in his head that tell him that he's not doing enough, that he should be working on something bigger than fighting cancer. Can you imagine that? And also, Thad has had to change his expectations about what makes a good and productive day. Yes, when people are fighting cancer, they're supposed to enjoy every sandwich and carpe every diem. But as Thad says, some days just walking the dogs has to be enough. Thad and I know each other through his wife, Lee, who is my colleague at Facebook Sales in Los Angeles. She is a dogged, hilarious, and committed human being who sadly and unfortunately has a long family history with cancer, as you'll hear Thad share. I am grateful to Thad for sharing his story today. I think will inspire a lot of people who are overdue for a doctor's visit to finally pick up the phone or go online and make that appointment. But more importantly, and I'll speak personally, Thad has really made me think hard about how much every day matters and how much we should be committed to taking care of our health and the relationships with those we love. Because there's nothing Thad wouldn't give for a little extra time. Here's how Thad basically sums it up. Go to the doctor, listen to your wife, hug your kids, and tell the people you love that you love them. It's as simple as that. Prior to his diagnosis, Thad spent over 2 decades as an educator, both as a teacher and an administrator at well-known schools like Crossroads in Santa Monica and Mark Day School in Marin County. He earned his BA from the University of Washington, master's degrees from both UCLA and Brown University, and his doctorate from the University of Southern California. I hope you will enjoy and listen to this conversation with Thad Reichley. How are you doing today?
Ah, that's always such a fun question. I would say my response to that is good enough. That's kind of what I am starting to tell people now when they ask me how I'm doing. I would say I woke up this morning feeling relatively happy about the day, relatively sore. My body doesn't feel great, and still pretty tired. Like I could go back to bed right now very happily and
And
spend a
it's 10:30 in the morning in
and
Marin
spend a
County
few
right now.
hours. Yeah, but it's a beautiful day here, and I did get a chance. I walked the dogs this morning, and that's always a nice way to start my day. So I have enough energy to walk the dogs, which I would say is good. And you are my one event for the day that I have planned. So if I make it through this, it's a banner day,
Well, I appreciate you making time and energy for this.
of course.
I know both are limited commodities in any given day for you.
Yeah,
Tell me, why did you go to the doctor in November of 2023?
because of my wife. Is that usually the right answer? I mean, yeah, it was almost 2 years ago, and I had been traveling. I had gone to Colorado to visit a brother of mine who lives there, and some friends that live there. I've lived in Colorado for about 4 or 5 years in a former life, and I had taken a new job and asked for a certain start date so that I could enjoy the summer and sort of the early fall. So I was doing this last trip to Colorado to visit people um, before starting that job, and went there and wasn't feeling great. Uh, Kind of chalked it up to altitude. Maybe I had a little bit of a cold. I was approaching 50 at that point and was actually actively trying to settle into the mindset of, oh, I am not a superhero. There are things that are going to catch up with me. I'm getting older. And so I was really just sort of going through this trip and
So hang on one second. When you say
yeah.
superhero, describe your physical fitness routine prior to this happening.
I mean, at different stages of my life, my physical fitness routine has always been, in a nutshell, about what can I do to my body and still function the next day. I guess that would sort of be the way I would describe it. I mean, I've been an athlete all my life. I've trained for different things at different levels
How many
at
marathons have
different
you
times.
run?
I've run, I think at last count, somewhere between 35 and 40. I'm not exactly sure. I'd have to go back and
And
scan the results.
cycling, are you a triathlete as well?
I was a triathlete for many years. I was actually able to be good enough to get my pro card in the triathlon world, which when I did that 25 years ago, you didn't have to be an Olympic caliber athlete in all three events to do it. You know, to think about doing it now was be crazy, but I was able to race with the big boys for about 10 years, which was really fun. So yeah, I've spent a lot of time just sort of punishing myself in the name of a good time and fun. And honestly, for me, it's always been about I love seeing what my body can do. And I've always loved sort of testing myself and setting limits and then trying to go beyond those. And I'm very goal oriented, so it's always helped me to have that goal. And I think I have a little bit of an addictive personality.
Mm.
And luckily I focused that on things that are somewhat healthy rather than the other end of the spectrum. So
Yeah,
it's always been an outlet.
seeing what your body can endure from a chemical or partying perspective is a whole different other
It's a whole
outlet.
different ballgame, and I've never been very good at that. So
But
I've
to,
stuck
but
with athletics.
but to, to your point, you're approaching 50 and you're starting to realize that you're not Superman.
Yes. And so I was, I did what I usually would do. I got off the plane in Colorado, and on my way to my buddy's house, I pulled off to the side of the road and did an 8 mile trail run at this place that I absolutely love, and felt like shit, to be honest. I was like, oh, the altitude is getting to me. I'm getting old. This is hard. And finished that up and spent the rest of the trip kind of doing the same thing, hanging out with friends, trying to relive the glory days and doing all these trail runs and things that I used to do. Got back from that trip and was still not feeling great. We ended up going on a college visit with my oldest daughter, and I was coughing and having this annoying little, just sort of deep cough. And we got back, and my wife's like, "You need to go to urgent care and figure out what's going on." So went to urgent care. They checked me out, gave me an inhaler, said, "Try this for a little bit. If it doesn't get better, let us know." And 5 days later, I
I
was a mess,
Yeah.
and I went to the emergency room, and that's when they did an X-ray, and my right lung was uh, completely full of fluid, and so they admitted me immediately, and really thought I had pneumonia. So that's when I spent about 3 weeks in the hospital trying for them to try to figure out what was going on, and
And
finally.
they're draining fluid out of you on a daily basis at a prodigious rate.
Yeah, I was working with a number of doctors, and they had infectious disease folks coming through. They had thoracic specialists coming through, all these folks, and they were really just treating me as if I had pneumonia, even though I didn't test positive for pneumonia. But yeah, I was draining about a liter to a liter and a half of fluid a day while I was in the hospital. So they had me on a tube, and I was kind of carrying around this briefcase that was collecting everything. And I also had the flu when I was admitted, so I did have something going on, which was one of the reasons I felt so lousy. And so they put me on Tamiflu, and within about 5 days, I was feeling much better. I mean, I was still draining fluid, but I had
From
gotten
your
over the flu.
your lungs and your chest cavity is where the fluid's coming from.
Yeah, the fluid was coming actually from the pleural cavity on my right side, so not actually from my lung itself, but from the sac that sort of is around your lung. And so once I got over the flu, I felt a lot better. And I was at the point where, I'd been there for about 2 weeks and was kind of itching to go home. And the thing that was keeping me from going home was the fact that I was still draining all this fluid. So They decided to do a procedure called a VATS procedure, and basically they were going to go in and seal up the cavity between my lung and my pleural cavity. So just kind of seal it up. They actually rough it up, and then they put talc in there, and it just kind of glues it together with the hope that that will keep the lung from creating friction. It's kind of like a blister and creating this fluid. So got all ready for that. Was excited. Was hoping that would work, and then I'd be able to be discharged. And it was during that surgical procedure that the thoracic surgeon found 3 dozen tumors in that pleural cavity area. And he came out immediately and told my wife Lee that he said it's cancer. We have to wait for the biopsy, but I am almost 100% sure, based on the color and the presentation of these tumors, that he has cancer, which was really ironic because my wife. She is a very persistent, and she's my bulldog, and she had been asking, I kid you not, every specialist that came into my room if it was cancer, and everyone to a person said, no, this isn't presenting as cancer, it's pneumonia or something else that we just can't put our finger on, but this is definitely not cancer. We just have to figure out what it is. And so
Why did she
um,
start asking that question, do you think?
I think partly because she is somewhat of a worried person, and that's kind of where her head goes, and
Mm-hmm.
partly because of her own history. Her mom
Oh,
passed away
right.
from cancer. Then her dad remarried, and his second wife passed from cancer, and so it was sort of part of her life and something that was causing anxiety for her, I think, on a regular basis anyway. And so that's kind of where her brain went. And I'm the sort of the opposite end of the spectrum, where I sort of poo-poo anything until I have hard evidence. And I was just like, this isn't cancer. It's definitely something minor. I'll be out of here before I know it. I'd had pneumonia before. I'd gotten through it. I was like, this will be no big deal. I'll get out of the hospital and I'll be fine. Um, so another moment in our marriage where she was right.
And the diagnosis was what exactly?
The diagnosis was stage 4 metastatic melanoma. And it's kind of an
Doesn't sound
interesting one.
good.
No, it's not the kind of thing you want to hear. And it was interesting because it was also metastatic melanoma is relatively rare in the world of cancer. Um, and for me, I came to find out that, we still have yet to find a source on my skin. And there may not have been a source on my skin. It may have actually originated in my pleural cavity, which would be rare, but it does happen sometimes.
That was my question. When I hear melanoma, I think skin cancer. So how does skin
Yep.
cancer find its way into your pleural cavity, or do you know?
Yeah, I don't know 100%, but I guess there are areas in your body where it can pop up, and the pleural cavity is one area. They were talking about nasal cavities as another area, in and around behind your eyes are another area where the doctors had said it can originate. So it's one of those things. Or I could have had something on my skin at some time that we just didn't notice. I've had so many PET scans since then, and nothing has lit up on my skin. So it's one of those things we'll probably never know where it came from if it didn't originate in the pleural cavity.
So you hear the word cancer, where does your brain go?
It was a pretty dark moment. I think my brain initially went to Lee and my daughters. I have a high school daughter, a junior in high school, and then a freshman in college. And I think that's immediately where I went, is just thinking about anything that would limit my time with them, and really kind of being devastated by that. It's interesting that the moment that I actually knew something was wrong was before I heard the diagnosis. And that was a weird moment too, because I went into the surgery. I came out and they sort of put you in this little holding pen for a while to make sure you're coming back to life and going to be okay. And so I was sipping on a ginger ale down there waiting. And it seemed like it was taking longer for them to bring me back up to the room. The nurses were all lovely and it was fine. And then when they finally did bring me back up to the room, there was nobody there. And that that again, you know my wife, that's not like my wife to not be there waiting for me coming out of a surgical procedure. So immediately I was kind of wondering what was going on. And then after about it felt like a really long time. It was probably only 5 or 10 minutes. I texted Lee and I said, "What's going on?" And she just said, "I'll be there in a minute." And I just kind of knew something was going on. So that was a long couple of minutes waiting for her to come in, and she came in with her dad and his wife, and gave me the news, and just sort of changed the trajectory from that point on. So we had our moment of tears and our moment of, all right, we're going to do this. We got this. And then we just sort of went into problem solving mode and figured out what was next and where we go from there.
Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for listening to this far into the episode. I'm very grateful to Thad for sharing his story. To make his words have as much impact as possible, I hope you'll take a second to share this episode with a friend, maybe somebody who's going through something pretty serious, something pretty heavy, somebody who's a caretaker for a loved one, or somebody who just needs to start seeing the beauty in life, somebody who's a little consumed with their day-to-day problems and might need some perspective. Take a second, share it with them with love and the hope that we can make the most of Thad's journey to help the rest of us get the most out of our days. Thanks. When you hear stage 4, do you start going like, how much time do I have left? What's the prognosis? Like, what do we do? Like, how did those conversations proceed?
Yeah, I think that's sort of immediately where your head jumps. I think we're all sort of programmed on the outside, hearing these different stages of cancer and attaching our own sort of level of, uh, how bad that is.
And
And
ignorance,
I,
because
and ignorance. Yeah.
you don't know what it means until you start doing the research, and this has become your life. You're an expert on having this disease, right?
Right.
But you
Right.
probably gave no thought to prior to that very day.
Yeah, and then you start to read about it more later, and you realize, oh, it's the stages are somewhat arbitrary, and some of them are just based on very specific things that happen. Like stage 4 just means that it's metastasized to someplace else in your body beyond your skin, right? And I learned that after the fact, and that doesn't make it any less, of a bad diagnosis, but it just kind of puts things in perspective a little bit when you start to understand where these sort of stages come from. But yeah, that was, I think immediately you start thinking about how much time do I have left? What's the treatment? And I think that again, out of ignorance, the immediate thing is, okay, radiation, chemotherapy, I'm going to lose my hair, I'm going to be in the hospital, I'm going to be sick. But I've also, my mom is a two-time breast cancer survivor. And so I sort of know the routine as well. And my brain also was kind of going to, okay, I can handle chemotherapy. I can be miserable for months to years, and I can get through that. And let's do it. Let's get through this thing. And then as I started to talk with doctors and figure stuff out, realizing that melanoma is its own beast and doesn't respond to chemo and radiation. And so then you start talking about other treatments and what that's going to look like, and just getting your head around all of those different pieces. So yeah, it was really a whirlwind, and that was on November 12th where I was diagnosed. I was still in the hospital for another 6 days after that because I continued to drain fluid, and they actually ended up finally letting me out of the hospital with a home drain, which I did not want, but ended up being the only way I could get out of the hospital. So I had that in for another 3 or 4 weeks at home, which was its own special treat of, trying to sleep and drain a
Oh,
couple of times a day and do all that stuff while I was dealing with all the other madness around my treatment and what that was going to look like. So
and
yeah, it was a lot.
are you sleeping at this point? Like, are you staring at the ceiling thinking, what now?
Uh, Probably a little bit of the sort of worrying and perseverating on things for sure. I don't think I've slept well since I was admitted to the hospital that November. I don't think I've had a good night's sleep since then, both because of side effects and sleeping in hospital beds doesn't really work, and then the worry and all the doubt and things that come along. So sleep is definitely something you come to really appreciate
Yeah.
when you have a diagnosis like this. And um, it's if you're able to sleep well, don't take that for granted because it is a gift. It's
You need,
something that I miss dearly.
you need that podcast with Matthew McConaughey talking you
I think I
through.
do. Maybe I will try it out and see. All right, all right, all
All
right. We'll
right.
see what he
You're going
does.
to sleep so good tonight, buddy.
I'm gonna sleep so well.
That was a terrible Matthew McConaughey impression. So I just want to say this is why I'm not famous yet, is because I don't have any impressions, man.
But
Hey, I want to, we talked a few minutes the other day, and the first thing I said to you, which anybody watching this on YouTube, which you should check out, by the way, if you're listening to this on Apple Podcast, you can see a very handsome, healthy looking Thad Reichley. You don't look like what I think most people would imagine a stage 4 cancer patient looks like. You look like a normal dude who's in pretty good
yeah.
shape.
Yeah, I mean that is interesting. I would say if you ever want to feel good about your appearance, get diagnosed with cancer because people that's the first thing that everybody says to me right now is, "Oh, you look great." And I've started to just take it and run with it because what do you say to that? I mean, it's silly, but it is an interesting thing because because I'm not doing chemo and radiation, I'm not losing my hair. I
You
mean,
bastard.
I'm quite a bit lighter and I have a much different body composition than I used to. So there's things that I notice that other people may not necessarily notice. And there have been times throughout the process where, at one point I was on 80 milligrams of prednisone for many months, and I got the puffy prednisone face and had issues where people could see me and know that something was going on during those times.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I can go out into public and people don't necessarily know anything is going on with me.
So talk to me about your treatment plan. You use both bioinhibitors and immunotherapy, correct?
Yeah,
What
that's
what
correct.
what are those, and what are the pros and cons of each of those?
So, um, immunotherapy is basically uh, supercharging your immune system to attack the cancer, which, when it's effective, is really great. And when it's not, it's pretty common that it doesn't work for folks actually. But it's also a pretty toxic process. And so there are a number of different immunotherapy regimens. And I was on two medications called Ipi-Nivo. That's sort of the shorthand for ipilimumab and nivolumab. So that's the other thing you get good at is trying to pronounce these crazy medications throughout this process. Basically, they are because they jack up your immune system, it attacks the cancer in theory, but it also attacks everything else in your body. And so, because of that, I've had a number of side effects, including colitis, inflammation of my colon, uveitis, inflammation in my eyes, pancreatitis, inflammation of my pancreas. Pretty gnarly things that have sent me to the emergency room and,
You're
caused me to be pretty ill.
yeah, you're skipping over colitis like it's a garden variety upset stomach, but it's not.
Yeah. Yeah, colitis for me was pretty gnarly. I spent quite a few months dealing with that and several trips to the emergency room and extended stays in the emergency room when I just couldn't keep anything in my system and, lost 25 pounds and
And you can't be
was
more than 30 seconds from a bathroom at any one
oh
time.
yeah, it is really debilitating. And it was very humbling because I was as weird as it sounds, that was a time in my life where I actually felt better than I do now. Because I was going to the bathroom a ton and I was sort of living on the toilet at times, but I was able to function like I didn't feel awful otherwise. And I was hungry and I was able to eat. And in fact, I was kind of able to eat whatever I wanted because I was trying to put in all these calories to make up for what I was losing. but then I would want to go to coffee with a friend, and I'd have to literally pack myself a diaper bag in the car in case something happened and I couldn't get to a gas station in time, and I had to literally possibly change my clothes. And luckily I never had to do that, but just the thought of being an adult and having to pack yourself an emergency set of clothes and wet wipes and things in case you can't make it to the bathroom is it's definitely a humbling moment.
Yeah, I saw my dad do that when he had prostate surgery, and I know it affected his pride pretty significantly. Have you basically just put your ego to the side through this journey? I mean, has that been one of the lessons of how out of control we are of our own bodies?
Yeah, I would say on many levels, because there's nothing like being in the hospital to help you get over any ego and pride you have, or any
Right.
any sense of self with your body. They poke and prod and look and check everything. So you kind of get used to just being on display in that regard. And so I've gotten used to that. Yeah, there isn't much that I am self-conscious about now as far as what I need to do to exist. I think the biggest struggle that I still have with my ego is when it comes to my physical fitness and my ability to do or not do things that I used to. And some of that's athletic. Like, I do miss that feeling of being an athlete and being able to go for a run and getting both a sense of just the feeling of joy that I get from that, but also, there's some ego attached with being able to run a certain pace or complete a certain bike ride and those types of things. Um, but that's kind of a constant for me. I literally can't lift the things that I used to do, and I have to think about things differently when I am in spaces, and I trip over things that are silly now, and I have a hard time getting in and out of the car, and so those are the ways where I feel the biggest blow to my ego is when I'm sort of feeling like a little old man before my time, and not able to function the way I used to.
I'm tempted to take my shirt off right now to make you feel better about yourself.
Yeah,
Like,
we
look
could
at,
both
I've
do
got
that,
nothing
right?
going
Yeah,
on with me, Thad, and look how bad I look. So,
yeah.
so tell me about your typical day, and they can be, and some of the days when things were at their worst, and some of the days when, like, what's a good day today? Good day these days.
A good day these days is waking up and feeling positive. I think mindset still, no matter what, has so much to do with how my day is going to go. And I work hard to try to control my mindset, and sometimes I'm I'm better about that than I am at other times.
How do you do
But if
that?
I wait, uh, I'm not a traditional like sit down and meditate type of person, but I've always sort of used exercise as my meditation, and I will think through things and process things. So I still do that while I'm walking the dogs or throughout my day. Just try to focus on gratitude and positivity. And I do visualize. And so I will literally visualize my body fighting the cancer and working more towards a healthy state than it is. And so those are the types of things that I can sort of work through. And again, some days I'm much better at it than others. And I would say some days the physical aspect drives the train, and other days I'm able to let my brain drive the train more. And those are my better days, probably. But yeah, getting up, I usually am up before others in the house just because I'm not sleeping well. At times, that was like 3 or 4 in the morning, and now it's more 6 in the morning, 6 to 7, which is much more reasonable.
That's
But
normal.
getting up, feeding the dogs, having some coffee, watching the news for a couple of minutes, and then out and walking the dogs is great. And having some activity, social interaction with someone that's not my immediate family is is a positive thing. And being able to make it up until 8 o'clock at night, that's a goal.
Yeah,
And
that's a
getting to
that's a
spend
big one.
time with my daughter and my wife, and maybe talking to my daughter who's in college. So it's pretty simple. Those are. I've also shifted from feeling like I need to be really productive, to being okay with having limited productivity, and or shifting sort of what counts as productivity now for me, and being okay with the fact that my job right now is sort of to keep my body as healthy as possible, to stay alive in really basic terms, and to be here for one more day. I mean, that's really kind of it. It's like I, my job is to make it through today, and then my job tomorrow is to make it through tomorrow. And and some days I'm really good at being okay with that, and other days I miss work and I miss being productive and I miss giving back to society in some sort of meaningful way. And that can be pretty depressing. Like when I miss those things, I miss them deeply, because I spent a lot of time in my life working to make the world a better place, and working with kids and doing things that I felt were really positive and influential in some way.
That was a big part of your identity.
Yeah, huge, huge. And so I think my job, I worked in education for 25 years, and so it was nice to have a job where that sort of giving back to society was sort of built into my job. So I didn't necessarily have to look for all these other ways to volunteer or do other things, because I was on a daily basis working with kids and teachers and parents, and hopefully doing something good in that world.
When that guilty voice gets the better of you, what's it saying?
Um, it's pretty dark, and it's something I talk with Lee about pretty regularly. It's feeling like a drain on society, feeling like a drain on the family, feeling like more of a burden than a benefit to others around me. And it's really not a fun place to exist. Um, and it's not through anything that anyone around me is showing or
Of
doing.
course.
It really is. It's just me. And when you're having to get in bed at 2 in the afternoon while your significant other is managing the finances and doing laundry and taking care of the kids and really shouldering a bulk of the parenting, that's that's hard. And there are times when I can sort of fight through it and help and be okay. And there are other times where I just physically can't engage and can't do stuff. And again, some days I'm okay with that, and some days I can just be all right. And then other days it sort of adds to it adds to the awfulness of being in bed all day long, when I'm just sitting there and I'm feeling sorry for myself, and then I'm feeling guilty, and then it's just this kind of gross spiral to be in that can be hard to get out of.
That there's a lot of husbands that are like that and they don't have cancer. So,
It's yeah,
so
I don't know. I mean, and I don't think I have too unreasonable of an expectation of what it means to be a productive spouse, but um, maybe I do. I don't know.
no, I think this is what's interesting. Part of one of the many things that's interesting about this, because when you think about terminal illness, that's not where your brain goes right away. That there's going to be this mental battle inside of you, is in addition to a biological one that's got to be waged and navigated. You even said, and so you've written 11 updates, and it's interesting that I was going to ask you at some point about how cancer has connected you with other people. You've written 11 updates. You and I have had more communication in the 2 years since you've had cancer than in all the years we've known each other at a distance prior to.
Yeah.
And so it's like I know more about you today than I knew on November 1st of 2023. Um, and so through these letters, one of the things you said, and I want there's that famous Warren Zevon quote when David Letterman asked him on the Late Show, "Is there something you don't know, having gone through this, that I don't know?" And Warren Zevon said, "Well, only that you should enjoy every sandwich." But you wrote this: "You feel guilty sometimes at the end of the day when it feels like you didn't carpe diem enough, as if that obligation to enjoy every sandwich is just that, an obligation, and it weighs on you."
Yeah. Yeah. That's it's funny you should say that because I have been thinking about that a lot recently. Um, that idea of honestly, it's there's a stress that comes with that feeling of live every day like it's your last.
Mm.
And that I think you see that from a lot of people who have terminal illnesses who will put that on their Instagram page or talk about an experience that now I live every day like it's my last, right? And I struggle with that a great deal because that's exhausting and it's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
And some days, just again, just walking the dogs has to be enough. And, if because of my illness, were to say, oh, I'm going to make decisions like this is my last day, am I going to be buying sports cars and taking trips and
Go base
doing
jumping
things?
or something.
Right. And I mean, I feel really lucky because I definitely am not someone who has this bucket list of things that I feel like I need to do before I die. I feel like I have lived a very full and happy life. I don't have a lot of regrets in my life. And so for me, that idea of carpe diem and this and that, it can be way too much. And I don't think it's healthy. I don't actually think it's a positive way to live your life because I think I'm leaning more into what are the little things in my day-to-day life that are just normal that are pretty spectacular, right?
The
And
blissfully quotidian.
yeah,
Like
and
what is and what do you and what is that for you?
it's everything. It's a song. It is a smell. It's a vista when I'm outside. It's a text from a friend that I haven't talked to in a while. It's a touch from my wife. It's a phone call from my daughter who's in college. It's like, and I'm going to get emotional just sort of thinking about it. It's like it's those little things that are just the human things, right? It's not this purchase. It's not necessarily this vacation. Don't get me wrong. Those are amazing things and amazing goals. And I've had some great trips and there's still things I would love to do with my family. But there's also a lot to be grateful for on a day-to-day basis. And I think on my good days, I can appreciate and really lean into what I'm grateful for, even with all the crap that I've gone through the last 2 years. And I can realize that there are others out there who are in much worse shape than I am, and I can appreciate the luck that I have in my life. And that's another thing that people say a lot is either people don't necessarily say it to your face as much, but they'll write it to me, like how unlucky this is or life's not fair. And I have a really hard time with that as well. And don't get me wrong, like I don't think I deserve what I'm going through right now, and there is a certain amount that I do feel like, oh yeah, it's kind of unfair that I have to deal with this. But the flip side of that is like it's also really in some ways unfair how amazing my life has been to this point, right? And how many amazing things have happened to me that uh, you could say are unfair. I mean, really. And so I try to focus on that aspect of, yeah, when people say it's unfair, I kind of in my head I think, yeah, but it's also unfair how amazing my experience has been for these last 49 years before my illness. And even during my illness, there's been some pretty spectacular things that have happened that I, you know, never could have predicted.
Yeah, nobody deserves cancer, but then nobody
No,
deserves to be as rich and, lucky
right.
as most of us are.
Yeah, I didn't deserve to be a white male born into a middle class family with lots of privilege, right? And I didn't deserve to have all the experiences that I had. And yeah, I worked my butt off through my life, but I've
Yeah.
also had just some really amazing luck that has brought me a lot of happiness and a lot of cool experiences and put me where I am now. And so again, this is when I'm in a good space, I can focus on that. And believe me, I have my pity parties and I have my time crying in bed by myself and worrying about things and stressing about things. But For the most part, I really do try to focus on what an amazing experience I've had, and what I still could potentially enjoy in whatever time I have left.
Tell me about the clinical trial that you're a part of.
Yeah, the clinical trial that I'm taking part in is pretty exciting. It's you know, clinical trials, I think, again, out of ignorance, when you are on the outside of an illness, it sort of feels like this magical world where, oh yeah, someone's in a clinical trial. That's a really positive thing. And when you are actually on the battlefront and trying to get into a clinical trial or trying to find a clinical trial, they're much harder to find, much harder to get into, much less successful than I think most people would believe if they weren't going through this. And so, um, that's just something I think people should be aware of, is it's not like there's people knocking down your door when you have cancer to enroll you in a clinical trial. You're the one that has to do the research, and you're the one that has to try to figure this stuff out. And even if you do find them, they're not very successful and they can be hard to get into. So, but this clinical trial is out of Stanford, and it is a new version of a previously FDA approved process called TIL therapy, and TIL stands for tumor infiltrating lymphocytes.
Yeah, explain it.
Um,
It's Star Wars type stuff.
yeah, and so the traditional TIL therapy is pretty gnarly. It requires harvesting your cells that have actually shown to penetrate your tumor. So they actually go in and take out part of your tumor. They harvest the cells that have actually penetrated. They grow those in a lab into the billions. They re-inject them into your system. Prior to re-injecting them, they put you through some pretty intense chemotherapy to sort of clean the slate in your body so that nothing else in your body will attack these cells. So you have to deal with all the traditional chemotherapy issues and the sickness and the hair loss and all that stuff. They re-inject the cells, and then the traditional way there was this medication called IL-2, which is very toxic. It's actually your body produces it when you have the flu or something along those lines. So, and it is actually, the doctor basically describes to me as it's what makes you feel crappy when you have the flu. So if you can imagine getting that at a really high dose, it just sort of it's really gnarly on your system and can cause a lot of longer term side effects. So the new treatment that they are working on is kind of at that moment where they're removing the tumor and then growing the cells, they're actually genetically engineering the cells while they're growing them. And for lack of a better term, they're kind of putting an on-off switch on your cells. And they program that on-off switch to be ignited by this very benign altitude sickness drug called ACZ. And so the idea is once they reinfuse those cells back into your system, they can then give you this ACZ that basically stimulates those cells to attack the cancer.
That's so
Um,
crazy.
so it's less toxic than the IL-2 that they used to do. You still have to be in the hospital for quite a while. So I'll be in the hospital for probably 3 weeks. And then once I leave the hospital, I still have to stay sort of in quarantine within 30 miles of Stanford. So I'll have to get an apartment down there and be in that area for, probably around 6 weeks all told. Um, but then the idea is if it works, they can then at different intervals use this ACZ drug to reignite those cells and get them to attack your cancer cells. So it's pretty exciting. It's still, the efficacy rates are still pretty low. It's, I think, around 31%, which sounds great, until you realize that when they describe what success is, it can be anywhere from 12 weeks of sort of halting the cancer growth to full no cancer detected. And so there is a wide range of what success looks like. And so I could go through this whole process and have it not be effective, or I could go through the whole process and have it just hold my cancer at bay for 12 weeks and then it starts to grow again. Or I could be one of the very few folks who come out on the other end of this with no cancer detected. And so that's the dream. And you kind of have to go in all in and just be positive and again visualize that it's going to work and hope for the best. And it for me, it's really nice to have something to actually look forward to because I was running out of options because immunotherapy wasn't working, was too toxic. I wasn't able to tolerate it. Bioinhibitors, we didn't really talk much more about those, but they historic or they basically halt the growth of the cancer cell at one of the stages in its reproduction, and they can be very effective, but they have a very distinct sort of efficacy period, which for most people is in the range of 7 to 18 months or somewhere in there. Some people do get more out of them than that, and some people get less, but it's sort of this limited sort of stopgap for folks for the most part. So I was kind of running out of options, and this felt like the right next step for me as we were exploring things. So we feel good to be a part of this and lucky that I'm still going through the screening process, so I'm not 100% in yet, but I hopefully, all things go well and I'm able to be enrolled and start the process here in mid-November.
Are you afraid of dying?
That's a really good question. I am not afraid of dying. Um, I'm not a religious person. I'm an atheist, and so I don't have a safety net of religion to sort of comfort me. And yet I don't really have any fear. There's a wonder about what happens next, and I would my fear is more in how I die. Um, I really do not want to die at the point where it feels like a relief to folks that I have died, if that makes sense. I would love to minimize the amount of time where I am unable to take care of myself, and where I am really truly relying on others to take care of me. Um, and so that's what I worry about, and some of that I have some control over, and some of it I don't. When I think about dying, it's less of a fear and more of just a sadness, because it's missing out on the life events that I have been so excited about throughout my life. With my daughters, oh my gosh, like just thinking about all the awesome stuff that they are doing and will continue to do, and thinking about the plans that Lee and I have for down the road, and just all those missed opportunities. Being a grandpa, like that, that's just something. I mean, like those are things that I just dream about, and I just to think about not having those opportunities, that just makes me really sad. So, and I also I get sad for the people around me. I get sad for my parents. Um, thinking about if I do die, how awful that is to think about burying your child. And so I think about that. I think about Lee and the girls, and the impact of losing your spouse, and the impact of losing your dad at a young age. Um, so those are the things that I think about when I think about death. But it's not a fear. It's not a it's not a worry. It's more of a sadness and saying goodbye to that. So yeah.
Is there any advice or insight you'd like to offer people who are dealing with others who have terminal illnesses or families who have somebody with a terminal illness that might help them to avoid saying the wrong thing or sending the wrong message, things like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it would be just you can't be afraid of saying the wrong thing. And yeah, I joke about stuff, and there are things that people will say or do that, rub me the wrong way, or over time it gets kind of old. And um, but at the same time, that shouldn't keep you from reaching out and from engaging. And we started to touch on a little bit about some of the gifts that come from this and some of the connections that are made or rekindled. And the email list that I send my updates to, those are folks that are, different levels of friendship and acquaintance in my life. And some of them, again, as you mentioned, I've gotten closer with in the last 2 years than I ever was prior to this. And so I think, the people that do it best are the ones that just reach out, even if they don't know what to say, and just make that connection and um, just do stuff. It's my wife and I in the very beginning when I was coming out of the hospital, my former school set up a meal train, and we were sort of prideful and resistant of that in the beginning, and then it just became this really beautiful thing for us. And people would always say, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to bring. And we always just so appreciated the folks that just didn't ask and just showed up and did something, or just dropped something off at our front door, or sent a note, or just, just took action and did something. And I think that would be my advice to folks is it can be really uncomfortable dealing with someone who is in, fighting with a terminal illness. Um, but I don't think you can misstep really if you are have good intentions and are just reaching out to make that connection with folks.
Is there anything else you want to share?
I mean, yeah, I think just that idea, just the the beauty of connection from this disease has been one of the gifts that's come from it. I've reconnected with my old college buddies, and we're on a text thread right now, and they're trying to find time to come out and visit me because I can't really go anywhere right now while I'm waiting for this clinical trial because I can't get sick. And we were trying to plan a reunion, and they're going to come to me, and these are guys that I would text with or keep in touch with a little bit. But over the last 2 years, we've all gotten together probably 3 times, and we're all in different places and all over the place. And we have this text thread now that's very active, and we're keeping in touch with each other. It's really beautiful to rekindle some of those friendships and to to have that back in my life again is really pretty awesome. So yeah, I really am appreciating that. And I will say it's kind of funny. It's thinking about death. One of the things, and Lee and I work with this amazing therapist um, who has helped us both. We meet with her both individually and then together. And she has just helped me lean into sadness and lean into emotions, and give them their space, but not let them take over my life. And so I've been much more open, I think, to thinking about my mortality. And I was struggling for a couple of weeks where I was just, every time I would get in bed or close my eyes, I was imagining my funeral, which in some ways was really beautiful and in some ways was just devastating. And because I would just get into details and I would get into, what music is playing and what are people wearing and what are people going to say and what would they say when they come up to Lee and what would her facial expressions be. And so I was getting into just, all these details and it was helping me process it in some ways. And I was talking to our therapist, and she was, just helping me lean into it, but put it in its place as well, and not have it take over. And I will say, kind of jokingly, one of the amazing things about having a terminal illness is that you get to experience some of the love and comments from people that they would usually reserve for after you die, which is kind of strange, but I've so appreciated the the feedback and the connection and what people have said to me, and being able to hear that while I'm still here. Like, I don't know if that makes sense,
It
but
makes total sense because you think about, well, we're all going to die.
right.
Some of us are going to have heart attacks in our sleep. Some of us are going to die in car accidents, etc. Some of us are going to have longer term debilitating illnesses. And when we're older and it's going to be expected and sort of I mean, I don't know. Look at the way my parents died. You saw it coming, and you try your best, but like at this age, it seems like, yeah, we're still all feeling like we're going to live. We're still making plans, most of us.
Yeah, yeah. And it goes both ways because I think I'm also so much more open to just telling the people around me how much they mean to me and why they mean something to me. And not just that I love them, but why. Like, what is it that you bring to my life and that you have over these years? Um, and so I think opening me up to be that way, and then also being on the receiving end of just the wonderful comments and the thoughts from people um, has been a real gift. I mean, don't get me wrong, I would trade that for a couple more years on the back end.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but when I think about sort of the positive things that have come from this, the connection and the ability to just be more expressive with people and just share with them more and be more. I mean, I cry on a daily basis now for any number of reasons, sad or happy, and I don't care. It is what it is, and it's um, I'm more accepting of myself and more accepting of my emotions and more accepting of the people around me and their flaws. That's the other thing. It's like I
Oh, and Lee has
things that used to
so
bug me
many
about folks.
flaws. So I just messed up that joke. I was saying
I,
your wife has so many flaws. Lee, for those
so few flaws.
they so few. No, Lee was so much fun to work with. She was a bulldog of a salesperson, but also had this wicked sense of humor. Um, and one of the things I love about your updates is that you are effusive and unerring in your praise for your wife. And marriage can be hard.
Yeah.
When things are good, and your appreciation for Lee is a very, very positive thing, and it reminds me to be grateful for my wife and for my family, and that's I want to say thank you for sharing those updates and for doing this conversation, because you said, well, I've had celebrities and stuff on the podcast. What could you possibly offer? I think way more than um, everybody except LL Cool J. Everybody except LL Cool J. So,
That's
as a
that's high
reminder,
praise.
yeah, I mean, right under LL Cool, Todd Smith.
To
Uh,
even be mentioned in the same sentence as LL Cool J, I'll take it.
I think, like, man, we all know this is coming, but for you to share what you're sharing, these are intimate glimpses into your life and into your family, and they've made me think harder about my life, and I guarantee you the dozens or hundreds of people that are reading your updates every time they come, are you're making them, forcing them to look in the mirror and be more conscious and purposeful about what's happening in their life. So thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah. I mean, I think final thoughts: go to the doctor, listen to your wife, hug your kids, tell the people in your life you love them. I mean, really, like,
That's
just
four great. Okay, say that again. Go to the doctor,
go to the doctor,
listen to your
listen to your
wife,
wife,
hug your
hug your
kids.
kids, and tell the people in your life that you love them. I mean,
Boom. That's a
there you
t-shirt.
go. Yeah.
Dad, thank you so much, man.
No, I appreciate you, and thanks for giving me the honor of doing this. Again, it's nice to connect with you. And if anything that I can share is helpful for other folks, um, that's a real positive.
I know it will be. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, take care.
Well, if you woke up this morning worried about some of life's inconveniences, I think Thad's story, and there are millions of Thads out there, families, people and families that are dealing with terminal illness and the great uncertainty of life, not knowing how much time they have left, not knowing how many days they have with their children, not knowing how many sunsets they'll see. Not to be overly melodramatic or anything, but that's really what we're talking about here. And I often find myself stressing about stuff that does not matter. Paul Ollinger sweats the small stuff, ladies and gentlemen. I know that's a shock to you. I know that you listening to this grumpy, stressed out, middle-aged guy who's got no tangible problems, worries over things that don't really matter. Well, yeah, I do. I do. And I think a lot of us do. And that's part of being an ambitious person who thinks about things like success and happiness and all that kind of stuff. But no better way to remember that life is short than to listen to Thad's story. A couple of things that stood out to me here. Sometimes walking the dog has to be enough. What an incredible, eye-opening, beautiful, and tragic statement all at once is that, and as Thad said, he's got the luxury of at least seeing that, of understanding that he has a terminal illness and that he doesn't know how much time he has, and that fighting this disease it forces him to change his perspective on life, and that sometimes walking the dog is enough, and to sit there and go, without having to over stress about enjoying every sandwich, to say, like, this is it, this is a good day, this is what matters. And maybe if each of us did that, we wouldn't worry so much about the things that don't really matter. Hey, I had a good day. I did this thing. I cooked dinner for my kids. I got to have a conversation with an old friend on the phone or over Zoom. I read a book. I read something that made me think. Those things are the elements that make up a life. And that has this opportunity to see it through that lens. And I think we would all benefit from seeing our life through that lens, even if we presume we have more time to experience more of those things. Speaking of which, here's something else that occurred to me. Making plans is a luxury. That if you're sitting here thinking about, oh, I'm going to have grandkids, as Thad mentioned, we're going to take a trip to Italy in 2 years, or we're building a house, or whatever it is you're doing. And they don't have to be, giant projects. But if you're like, I'm working towards running a marathon or losing 10 pounds, whatever these things are, long-term plans are a luxury. We won't always have that kind of time to be able to see our ideas come to fruition. And understanding that will maybe, again, help us enjoy the process instead of the outcomes. Number 3 or 2, I don't know what number I'm on, but when I think about the story of how Lee is there for Thad and how Thad is there for Thad and Thad is there for Lee and his daughters, that, someday you're going to have to be strong. Someday, we don't think about it, but, when the time comes, we will be called on to be stronger than we know how to be. I interviewed Julie Saxon about 4 or 5 years ago. She's a former Yahoo colleague. Funny how these are all internet salespeople that I'm talking to about cancer. Julie's husband died of colorectal cancer, I believe, after a 5 or 6 year battle. And she said that she was his Lee in that situation for all those years, while being the mother to 2 kids and holding down a full-time job. Julie, came to her mantra, which was basically like, you never know how strong you can be until you have to be that strong. And someday we will all be called on to be strong in this way. Not looking forward to it, but hopefully we can answer the bell and have the character to deliver when that time comes. Lastly, you don't know what other people are going through. Thad looks like a healthy guy. He's got all his hair. He's a damn good looking guy, even with stage 4 cancer. And it's like, he's taken family trips that he mentioned, and he's sitting on airplanes. People sitting next to him doesn't know he has cancer. And so maybe we can all try to be a little bit more charitable to the person who's taking up our personal space, has a noisy cough or a crying baby on the plane, because we simply don't know. Is it likely that they have stage 4 cancer? No. The odds would say they don't, and maybe they're just being inconsiderate, but you don't know. You don't know. And so let's just try to keep that in mind as we go through the day. I hope that Thad's words meant something to you. Go to the doctor, listen to your wife, hug your kids, tell the people in your life that you love them. Quote unquote, Thad Reichley, November 2025. We'll see you next time.